Hey everybody, this is Giancarlo Aulino reporting for Heavy.com and the Game Plan, and I'm happy to be joined by my guest today who's going to be talking about all things real American freestyle and MMA. He is a former interim UFC welterweight champion. He is Colby Chaos Covington. How you doing, Colby?
I'm doing great, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And Colby, you're repping the brand here, RAF. You got the real American beer right here. So take us through just how excited you are, wrestling week and getting ready to step on the mats.
Yeah, I feel like a little kid the night before Christmas, when he just wants to open up those presents. I just want to get on that RAF mat and shine. That's where I shine the best is on those wrestling mats. It's the first sport that I truly loved and was passionate about. I remember my parents put me into wrestling when I was about 6 years old, and I followed in my family's legacy. My dad was a wrestler his whole life, and he just wanted his son to wrestle. And I fell immediately in love with wrestling. He showed me this sport, and he's like, "Hey, man, I know you're on the smaller size as a kid. If you want to stop getting bullied, you need to be a wrestler." So that's why I got into wrestling, and the rest is history. So I'm super excited to get back on the RAF mat this weekend. I'm so happy that they're keeping me busy. Unlike some of these other promotions, RAF is they've treated me the best that any promotion's ever treated me. So I'm very thankful to Chad Bronstein. He's an incredible CEO. He's a visionary. The things he has planned for RAF in his future is to bring it to the moon. So I'm just excited to see RAF continue to blow up and me to continue to help promote it and help give a bigger platform to some of these wrestlers so they can get some exposure and make a name for themselves.
That's great. And you're going to be taking on Dylan Danis. And when everybody heard that name, I think it was a surprise. A lot of people thought maybe Armin Sarukian is also on the card, would have been a great matchup, and some of the other guys. But how did Dylan Danis become the opponent for you at this event?
Yeah, Dylan Danis is, a guy we've been looking at for a long time, and we've wanted to compete against. He's a great grappler, world champion grappler. He wrestled in high school. He was a great high school wrestler, and it's a super fight. He's got a big name because he used to coach Connor, and he's also got the strength of 10 men because he took on 10 Dagestanis. So, he's a strong guy. He's someone that you can't underestimate. So, it's going to be a real challenge for me to have to figure out that puzzle on Saturday night. And, I'm just thankful RF is able to put it on, because he's banned from all the UFC events. So, we would never been able to do it in UFC. And I know a lot of fans have speculated for a long time. They've wanted to see us cross paths and compete and fight against each other. So what better way to fight than, in the greatest promotion on God's green earth right now than RAF at RAF 7 here in Tampa, Florida at the Yingling Center. Only on Fox Nation.
Yeah, definitely there. And just take us through what's a preparation like because you fought and prepared for title fights and now in wrestling, like how different is a preparation for this?
Yeah, it's similar to a fight camp. You're going through a rigorous grind every day where, you're trying to get your body physically ready to peak. You want your body to peak at the right time and you be feeling good on Saturday night when the cameras are on and you're live on Fox Nation. So, it's the same type of camp. I'm working on the techniques. Sorry, I lost you for a second. My Uber Eats is outside. I think they're calling me right now. No, but it's the same type of grind. You're in training camp, you're getting ready, you're peaking. Obviously a big part of it is techniques. It's like I always tell all the wrestlers, that I try and help coaches. Drillers make killers. You want to be the best wrestler, you're gonna have to be a good driller. You're gonna have to drill these techniques over and over until they become muscle memory, until they come on your conscious where like you're in a position in a live scramble, and then you're just cutting the angle and you're finishing your double leg. Like that's how it has to be. So I'm training hard every day. I'm training harder now than I ever did in my UFC career because I want to peak and, I want to, bring out my best potential out here in RAF. So, that requires, hard training. So, I've been training hard with a couple guys that I wrestle with in Iowa and Oregon State. And then, my buddy Phil Haas, he used to fight in the UFC. He's a great fighter and great wrestler. He wrestled at Iowa State. So, we just been Training hard, wrestling hard. I feel like I'm in my peak right now. I'm 38 years young. I'm taking good care of my body. I eat clean. I eat healthy. I don't drink. If I'm drinking, the only thing I'm drinking is real American beer. They got this amazing beer. It's called the Zero. So it can keep up with my active lifestyle. I know Brantley Gilbert was, a big focus behind getting this beer out there because he's been sober for about 10 years now. And this is a great beer where you can socialize with your friends, still have that good camaraderie, and feel like you're drinking beer, but it's not beer. It's zero, no alcohol, so it's amazing. But I feel great. I'm excited for Saturday night. I'm going to show out, and I'm going to show that I'm the best wrestler on earth.
That's great. And just that work ethic you're talking about there and just training, trying to get the best out of yourself. Who are some of the mentors that you had when you were coming up in wrestling that instilled that in you and, put you on the right path to have success in your career?
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, my parents. My mom and dad were my biggest motivators. They were my biggest role models. When I was a little kid, the first couple years of my life, first 6 years of my life, it was just my mom, working 3 or 4 jobs to put food on the table to be able to afford wrestling shoes so I could go to, these wrestling tournaments, and I could go to these summer camps and be able to, close the gap with all the other wrestlers in the country and the world. So, first and foremost, my parents, and then my dad, when he came in, he was all in with the wrestling, and he just wanted to see his son excel. He wanted to see his son do better than he ever did. So, I appreciate him, putting that commitment into me and putting that time into me, and the resources. They had to go out and work a couple of jobs just to be able to afford, the travel expenses to go to these wrestling tournaments and compete against the best guys in the country. So, my parents, first and foremost, they'll always be my biggest role models and motivators. But, then, came along when I was in high school, a guy named Dan Gable. And Dan Gable, was someone who really changed my mindset on how to approach training and how to approach competition. And it's like one of his quotes that he would say, hey, once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. And it's the truest thing ever. If you commit yourself, if you're dedicated and you work extremely hard every single day, it just, in wrestling, it just makes everything else in life doing it easy. It makes doing these media interviews easy. It makes, going out and repairing a roof or pouring some rebar on some concrete, easy. So, Dan Gable, and then, I got the privilege to be recruited by Dan Gable to University of Iowa for 1 year, and I got to go under his tutelage. He took me under his wing, and I got to learn from his mind every single day, man. The guy was, he probably had 2 or 3 hip replacements. He couldn't really walk, but he's still in there freaking doing top bottom positions in wrestling in the Iowa wrestling room with the guys. And I'm just like, dude, this is crazy. This guy's like in his mid 60s. He's going with 20-year-olds. He can't even move or walk because of his hip replacements, but he's still freaking riding these guys, and his grip is like a lion. And then his tenacity after practice, he'll go in the sauna and he's like, all right, guys, let's do these dumbbell curls. All right, let's get the bike in here. Let's fucking do some sprints on the bike. All right, guys, let's go freaking do this. Like, that's the type of mentality that you got from the Gable and the Iowa wrestling program, where they were just tenacious and just relentless, and they would do whatever it took to win. It's like the greatest story I ever heard from him is, right before the Olympics, he tore his ACL in his right knee, and he was about to wrestle all the Russians, and all the Russians knew it. So he switched up his lead leg that he's been wrestling his whole life with. He usually wrestles with his right leg forward, but he had to put it in the back because it was torn, and people didn't even know he wrestled just as good, didn't get a point scored on him in the Olympics. That's the type of mindset that we need from people in the world. Most people want to play victim. Oh, feel bad for me. Oh, my hurt this. Oh, my life sucks, this and that. No, that's not how it is. You got to approach it a different way. Hey, you still got another knee. You still got 2 arms. You still got 2 feet. You still got a working mind. You got to look around it. You can't focus and dwell on the negatives. You got to focus on the positives. So, those guys gave me a lot of good mindset, but first and foremost, it's all for my parents. I wouldn't be here without them. And, I just want to keep getting better and keep progressing in life.
That's great. And it's inspirational too, like some of those stories. And like, just even for you yourself, like, do you think that gives you a bad rap? Like, they see you at UFC press conferences, but now with RAF, you get to really open up and share like your inspirations, how you got in the sport, that you pretty much came from humble beginnings there.
Yeah, definitely. But who am I here to change anybody's opinion? Everybody can take everybody at face value. We're all entitled to our free speech here in America. That's what makes this country so great, is we're all entitled to free speech. But I think people need to, be a little bit easier going these days. I think people need to respect other people's opinion. I respect your opinion, if you have a different one than me, but I agree to disagree. But I'm not going to berate you and be like, oh, you're a bad person because you have a different opinion, or you went about your business this way because you had to put food on the table for your family. I'm not going to judge you on that, like it is what it is, but I don't know. I'm not trying to convince anybody who I am. It's up to the people and the fans to judge that. So, in the UFC, it's a lot different. If you kill what you eat. So if you don't go out there and, create some interest, create some hate, create a bunch of, headlines, then you're going to get looked over and you're never going to get a renegotiation on your contract. So, I did what I had to do for myself and for my family, but now I'm just thankful to be in the greatest promotion ever, RAF. They don't tell me, how I need to act or bring me to a summit like the UFC does, bring you to these athlete summits and tell you, hey, like you got to promote yourself. You got to market yourself. We're not going to do it for you. It's not like that with the RAF. RAF has been so generous to all the athletes. We have the greatest platform on Fox Nation. It's just incredible to be on the Fox News platforms. I mean, it's taken this sport mainstream faster than any sport probably in the history of mankind. So, and we know this is the oldest sport in mankind. The Romans were doing it, the Greeks were doing it. Everybody was doing it. So, I'm super thankful and blessed, man. And I feel like all this is from the man above, and that's why I'm here today, and that's why I get to go shine on Saturday night in RAF 7.
And I have to bring this up because I'm a Canadian, and your last time you were out there, you called out GSP. Georges St-Pierre, the welterweight takedown leader. You're number 2 on that list. Made sense. It got everybody excited, especially in Canada, because we all want to see George compete again. So how realistic is this? Could we see you be the one to lure George out of retirement and compete in a wrestling match?
Yeah, it's definitely realistic. He's had some calls with the CEO of Real American Freestyle, Chad Bronstein. So I know Chad's been on the call with GSP and they're trying to get it worked out. It's funny because right after that, GSP was in the wrestling room with his wrestling coach and he has wrestling shoes on again. And it looked like he was training. So, I think it's realistic. It's a good opportunity. RAF takes care of their fighters and athletes, and, if he wants to come earn, a good paycheck, I'm the guy to do it. Number 2 on the takedown list. He's the GOAT, he's the number 1, greatest welterweight in history, greatest takedowns in history. So I just want to settle it. I just want to challenge myself against the best. And that's what RAF is about. They want to put on the biggest and best fights that there is out there. So, I think it's very realistic. If we have to lure GSP out and we need to go to Canada, I mean, I know it's expensive to go to Canada. We're willing to go to Canada and we'll get this done in his backyard. Wherever he picks, he can pick the place, the time, the date, whatever he wants. But we want this matchup. It's a big matchup. I obviously want this matchup for my legacy. It's just, I've always wanted to compete against Georges St-Pierre. He's one of the greatest competitors we've ever seen on earth. And, to get to do it in the squared circle on the RAF wrestling mat would just be a dream come true for me. So I think it's realistic. He's interested. He's talking to them. He might need a little time to get ready, a couple months to go through a training camp and get his body, acclimated to the training schedule and make sure he's feeling at his tip-top shape again. But I think it's very realistic and I hope it happens, man. I want to see GSP on that RAF mat.
Be great. Love to see that. And just want to shift focus a little bit to the UFC. You were talking about, the promotion, and you have been outspoken as of late. There have been others like John Jones, Michael Venom Page has come out. What is it about maybe like the UFC that now fighters are starting to, be a little bit more outspoken about it in recent months?
I just think that the UFC is more concerned about the brand than they are concerned about the fighter. They think the brand is above the fighter, and they always forget that the fighter is what makes the brand. So, I've been critical to them, but I'm very thankful to what I have in my life, man. I've came from a blue collar family. I had absolutely nothing, and I have a great life now. I have complete financial freedom. There's not one thing I can't do every single day. I wake up whenever I want every day. my time schedule is flexible now. So that's all thanks to the UFC. They've done some great things for me. Of course, I'm a little upset that I didn't get everything I wanted. I wanted to be on the White House card. That was my dream, and they didn't give me the opportunity. And I thought that they were going to give me that. They were kind of stringing me along. So it's frustrating, but I don't think I can say any more bad will. I've said what I said. I'm not taking back anything I say. I'm not apologizing for anything I said because I said facts and I said truth. And, I know that they're bothered by that because, I got a call immediately from Hunter Campbell, and that's someone you don't want calling you sometimes. So, but I'm not going to double down. I'm not going to say any worse things about the UFC. I'm just going to focus on RAF. This is the promotion that I want to stay active in now. And I plan on competing, multiple times a year, 6, 7 times a year for RAF. And I want to build this league up. I want this league to rival with the UFC. I know they're different sports, but I think that this platform that we have on Fox Nation, which is amazing, by the way, I think this can really blow it to the moon and we can compete with these mainstream sports like UFC. So my whole focus is on RAF now. I'm looking past the UFC, like I have no more things to say about them. Thankful for my time with them. It's been amazing. Loved competing there. Love winning a world title and going to the White House and being the only fighter in the history of the company to go to the White House and hang out with the sitting president. That's a great honor for me. Everything I did, all the history I made in the UFC was incredible. But now it's about making history for RAF. I want to build this league up. I still have, my best competitive years ahead of me. And the UFC didn't want to utilize me. So RAF is, which I'm thankful for. So thank you to Chad Bronstein. Thank you to Terry Francis, the CEO of Real American Beer. And the best Colby Chaos Covington is to come.
The reason I asked that is because you have been active right now in RAF, and like you said there about the White House card. So like, do you still want to get a fight in the UFC like this year, or like an international fight week, or later in the year? Like, is your focus even like on anyone in the division in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to fight later in the year. That would be the perfect dream scenario for sure. I just want big fights. I've expressed that to the UFC. I'm not looking to fight some up and coming kid. I'm not looking to fight someone that doesn't do something for my legacy. I've been main eventing for 7 or 8 years, like I can't remember the last time I wasn't in the main event. I can't remember the last time I didn't fight a world champion. All the guys I've fought and just world champion after first ballot Hall of Famer after first ballot Hall of Famer. So, I just want big, meaningful fights. If it doesn't do anything for my legacy and for my career, then I don't want to fight for money. It's not about the money. I make great paychecks for sure. I'm making, nasty paychecks, which make me a very rich man. And I can't complain about that. But, when I got into fighting, it was never about the money. It was like how I was in wrestling and how every wrestler is. You don't compete for money. You compete for the glory, to overcome obstacles, to show that you're truly the best combatant on earth. So, if they can't give me those fights that are meaningful and that do something for my legacy, then, I'm going to get these matches in RAF. RAF is willing to go out there and get the biggest and best matches for me. So, we got some big things in store with RAF and some big matchups coming. There's a super fight this weekend with Dylan. He's not allowed in the UFC. So how about let's come to RAF and do this match? He's one of the most notorious guys out there who, is the coach to Notorious, ironically, but this needs to be settled, and we're going to settle it this Saturday, and then we'll see who's next. I heard some other people chirping, some former world champions in the UFC. So we're going to make the biggest and best matches happen in RAF. The UFC doesn't want to make those biggest and best matches happen right now. So I'm going to stay busy in RAF, and yeah, we'll see later this year. Maybe, if Connor's on that international fight card, maybe you could see me coming back for that to co-headline with him. But I'm just gonna keep training and just stay ready. That's all I've ever done is be prepared. And it's what, Dan Gable used to tell me all the time. He said, "Hey man, you should never have to get ready. You have to stay ready, Colby." So I'm gonna stay ready. I'm gonna keep using these wrestling matches in RAF to keep, leveling up my skills and staying in good shape and good competitive shape. And we'll see what the future holds. Only God knows that. This is all God's plan. Only He knows what's gonna happen. But I'm just going to stay prepared for everything.
That's great to hear. Hope to see you back in the octagon, but until then, we'll see you on the RAF mats. But just a couple final questions here. Just want to, ask a lot of fighters this, and we get some great, responses here. If you were to go back and see the young Colby Covington that was just starting out his career, you was to walk in a room and see the established Colby Covington and ask for advice, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh man, that gives me like goosebumps because it's crazy to think about that younger man, that was coming out of college with, 80,000 in student debt, didn't have a dollar to his name and, had to find his way the hard way, it wasn't the conventional way. I didn't have parents like Armin Sarukian, who he's a spoiled, privileged little brat. He's got his little parents that fund everything. He's on private jets, we're driving all these nice cars and watches because his daddy is providing it all. No, I had to provide it for myself. I had to become a self-made millionaire. And I did it through blood, sweat, and tears. And I would just tell that younger guy, the same guy that I was telling myself at that time anyways, was to never give up and to keep working, Colby. Keep working, man. Even when you're riding your bike to the gym, in Florida, when I first went to American Top Team, I had to ride my bike to the gym in the rain. It rains a lot in Florida. I'm riding my bike to the gym. I'm getting soaked. I got to go like 2 miles to the gym. I'm getting soaked. I'm soaking wet. All my clothes are destroyed. I still showed up. I still showed up with a smile on my face. I still went to practice and sparred 10, 15 rounds straight and kept a positive mindset. I didn't get down on my luck. I didn't say, oh, everybody feel bad for me. My life's so hard. I have no money, nowhere to sleep, no car, no friends. All I have is, no, I didn't care. I said, hey, man, let's go. Let's get in there. Let's go. Let's stay positive. Hey, let's start thinking of the future. I was a visionary. I thought about these octagon fights. I thought about when I was going to be locked in that octagon and the type of emotions that were going to be coming through me and the types of thoughts I was going to have in my head and how I had to keep my composure and keep my cool and just breathe and just work through it. And that was the big thing, is just to keep working through it. So, I'd tell that same kid just to keep working through it, keep finding ways to make it to the top, keep working hard every day and use these 24 hours. We all get 24 hours in a day. Use them wisely, use them more wisely than everybody else on earth. Everybody gets 24 hours in a day. How are you using these 24 hours different than everybody else in the world to create an edge for yourself and close the gap and distance the gap from all the competition in the world? So, the biggest thing is just never give up, believe in yourself, and keep working, young Colby.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. And on that note, Colby, I really appreciate you sharing your time and coming on here today to speak with me about this. And I wish you all the best this weekend at RAF.
Thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate you giving us a platform for RAF and Colby Covington and all the best in Canada. Get some poutine for me.
Will do, man. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks a lot.